I think that some people, or most people, think that in order for them to experience God or experience His power in their life, that it has to be some traumatic, huge moment. But that's just not the case. God can move in the most insignificant, small things. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to go with a small team to a school in Nigeria. I met a lady working in Dallas, and she invited me to go with them on the trip. So I went, and from the moment I got there, God began working in my life in a different way than He had before. He began showing me a different part of Himself, and I think just I got to see Him through a different perspective, being with people of a completely different culture, mainly people who are so dependent on Him for their basic needs. So with that, they were constantly in prayer, constantly aware of His presence, just this daily, just every single moment state of prayer and thankfulness. For example, right after we got off the plane in Abuja, the family I traveled with and the people that were there waiting for us all gathered together in a circle, and it was just like a natural impulse, held hands and started singing "To God Be the Glory." And it was not this showy thing, it was very personal, and I just of course started to bawl because I'd never seen people just so naturally just giving God praise. Everything is covered in prayer there because they're just aware of God and how He is sovereign over all things. So in that, instead of being strengthened and encouraged and just motivated to be more godly, I became more and more insecure, and I just compared my righteousness and my holiness to theirs. And I almost started to develop just this unhealthy fear of God, kind of this idea that He had revealed Himself to them in a way that was way more powerful than He had to me, and that I didn't even know Him based on their behavior and mine. And I just started comparing myself, comparing the way I lived my life, and I just became very afraid of God. This tendency to compare myself to other believers really didn't start in Nigeria. It's kind of been a problem for me since the time since I can remember. Just wanting to be God's favorite, if that were even possible, wanting to be His most faithful child, wanting to outshine others and impress Him, basically, and perform for Him and earn His approval and earn His love. So kind of with that as my background, when I was here, just immersed in this culture of intense spirituality, it was just, it was not good. So one day, about 2 weeks into the trip, blessing the lady who organized the trip, she instructed everyone to withdraw and take a day of rest and meditation and sort of reflect on everything we had been learning. And it was then that God changed my life forever. Whenever I got that time alone, the first thing I wanted to do was just open my Bible, and basically I was just kind of desperate. I was just so hungry for the truth and just to affirm myself and almost remind myself of what it means to be a believer and that I am saved, and I was just completely even doubting my own salvation. So I just decided to read specifically the words spoken aloud by Christ, His sermons. So I started in Matthew and I just began to read. I was filled up and I was just so immersed in His word that I completely lost track of time. I actually sat there reading somewhere between 6 and 8 hours. I'm not saying that to make myself seem more holy or devout. I just want to emphasize how God took me to another place. So I read and continued reading and praying, and kind of as I finished the book of Matthew, I just felt God tell me to go outside. And I know that sounds a little strange, but I did, and I just kind of waited there for a few moments, wondering what it was He wanted to show me. And all of a sudden, these little blue birds just kind of swarmed, and they just started flying kind of near me, all around. And it was like God just gently whispered to me and just said, "Courtney, I care for these birds. I love them. How much more do you think I care for you?" And then right after that, this kind of enormous, snow white, almost like majestic bird flew by me and like almost knocked me over. And I just was overwhelmed by how God would reveal Himself to me through the birds and through something so small. And he just really showed me that he did love me, and that if he cares for such lowly creatures, how much more does he care for the person who he's created in his own image. You know, it was a very personal, intimate thing. It was not dramatic. It was not this huge, traumatic ordeal. But God changed my life, and even though now I continue to struggle at times with trying to win the approval of God and kind of earn his favor, which just isn't possible, I will never forget the truth that he spoke to me on that day and in that moment.